Hey, I'm back on camera again! Oh, shut up. Okay, but seriously. About 5 or 6 years ago, when YouTube was better, heck, when everything was better, I made a list of my top 10 favorite anime films. Well, quite a lot has changed in 6 years. I've moved out of my parents' house, I have a partner, and in 2 years, I'll be 30. And honestly, I couldn't be happier. Because I'm doing what I like. And there's not a darn thing in this world that can stop me from following my dreams. But anyway, even though it has been 6 years since I made my top 10 favorite anime films list, and almost 11 since I joined YouTube in the first place, some things never change. I still use the words anyway, but, and well in every other sentence, so much so that you could probably turn it into a drinking game. But I'll tell you one thing that has changed. My tastes in anime films. For example, films that appeared on the original list that are not on this list are Project A-ko, Steam Boy, Lupin III, The Secret of Mamo, and Boggy, the Monster of Mighty Nature. I've added some films and rearranged some films that were on the original list to conform with my mature tastes. Also, there's more Studio Ghibli films than there were on the original list. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, but there are absolutely no Satoshi Kon films on this list. I thought Perfect Blue was okay. I have not seen Millennium Actress. Tokyo Godfathers I liked alright, but I absolutely did not like Paprika at all. Also, there's no Makoto Shinkai and no Mamoru Hosoda films on this list either. But with all that said, I am not a professional film critic. These films are just my personal favorites, and who knows, maybe in 5 years' time, I'll make another one of these kinds of lists. And then maybe 10 years after that, I'll finally get around to doing my favorite anime series. Anyway, here we go. Redline. I've said it before, and I'll say it again as many times as I want. This film looks amazing! But you know, there's more to it than that. This film was produced over the course of 7 years and contains over 100,000 hand-drawn, hand-inked, hand-painted frames. Director Takeshi Koike is truly a master of his craft. In my previous list, I compared this film to the entirety of the pod racing scene in Star Wars Episode I, The Phantom Menace. In retrospect, it's more like the film Grand Prix, without as much melodrama. Anyway, the story of the film, if one came for such a thing, takes place in the far distant future, where ordinary race car driving has become obsolete in favor of hover cars and such. However, some old-fashioned types still stick to their guns, or in this case, their engines. Among these racers is Sweet JP, a badass greaser fellow sporting a Fonzie jacket and a Leningrad cowboy's haircut. Seriously, just look at it. Poke somebody's eyes out with that thing. JP and a rival racer, Cherry Boy Hunter Sonoshi McLaren, who soon becomes JP's love interest, enter the amazing Redline race, a deadly race car track held on the planet Robo-World. The government officials are against this race, so they plan to use their military forces to eliminate the race, and, by extension, the racers, by any means necessary.
With extreme prejudice.
As I have said before, this film is entirely hand-drawn with none of that stupid CGI nonsense. And as such, the film looks all the more gorgeous for it. The colors shine through like nothing I have ever seen. If you have to own this film, and you have to because I say so, own it on Blu-ray. It's in super sleek high definition, so you can enjoy all those colors and race car action as much as I do. highly recommended.
Oh, hell no!
A deal's a deal. I want to see that finish line.
Spirited Away. This one, as well as a few others on this list, I have a bit of a nostalgic attachment to. Spirited Away came out in theaters in the United States when I was 12 years old. I remember seeing advertisements for it in the newspaper and begging my parents to take me to see it. When I did see it, boy howdy was I not disappointed. Spirited Away was written and directed by the amazing Hayao Miyazaki, whose name was plastered all over the American advertisements, as if American kids at that time knew who he was. Luckily, I did. If you have seen the movie, and I doubt that you haven't, then you'll already know the story and how much there is to gush about. If not, well, Spirited Away concerns a young girl, Chihiro, who, after her parents turn into pigs from eating magic food, gets transported into a magical world with an exquisite bathhouse full of talking animals and spirits and such. The old woman who runs the bathhouse, Yubaba, voiced by the late Suzanne Pleshette,
Go back to sleep, Mom.
changes Chihiro's name to Sen and forces her to work in the bathhouse. Spirited Away was, and still is, pretty darn amazing. This was still a time when I was watching Dragon Ball and G Gundam on Toonami, and even though I was semi-familiar with Hayao Miyazaki's work, I was still blown away. On top of all the praise it so rightly deserved, it also won the Oscar for Best Animated Feature Film at the 75th Annual Academy Awards, the first and so far only animated feature film to do so. Hayao Miyazaki would later go on to be nominated for 3 more Oscars, and Studio Ghibli would be nominated for 6. However, I will never forget that 12-year-old boy sitting in the movie theater being wowed by Spirited Away. It will always have a special place in my heart.
Welcome the rich man. He's hard for you to miss. His butt keeps getting bigger, so there's plenty there to kiss.
Mind Game. Yeah, as if we haven't had enough Masaaki Yuasa in our lives already. But you know what I say? You can never have too much of Masaaki Yuasa. And especially recently, with the release of Devilman Crybaby on Netflix, as well as the release of his latest 2 films in American theaters this year, Yuasa has had something of a well-deserved resurgence in popularity. And it all started with Mind Game. Mind Game is about... That's actually a pretty good question. Maybe if I put it like this. Okay, but seriously, if Mind Game is one of my favorite anime films, then I'll be darned if I'm not going to even attempt to summarize it. So here goes. Mind Game is about a nebbish cartoonist named Nishi who is in love with his childhood friend, but she is actually engaged to be married to another man, and Nishi gets murdered by some Yakuza hitman, and then after he goes to heaven, he comes back and steals his girlfriend and a barista, then drives one of the Yakuza's cars into the mouth of a whale, and one there they meet an old man who's been living inside of the whale since the 1950s. Then they escape, and then... I said I was gonna attempt. But really, Mind Game isn't the kind of movie you go into when you want to watch something deep or meaningful or, above all, coherent and conclusive. I wouldn't even call it the kind of movie you watch, necessarily. It's more like an experience. Like listening to the music of Frank Zappa. It doesn't really fall nice and neat into any one category or genre. It may even transcend category or genre and become its own category or genre. Essentially, I suppose what I'm trying to say is... watch Mind Game. It's so awesome. Castle in the Sky. This is the latest Miyazaki masterpiece I've seen as of this writing. And, like the others I've seen, I have a bit of a history with this, but only a slight history. I remember renting a VHS tape of some dumb movie when I was a little kid. I think it was Deep Rising or something. It might have been another, but believe me, the less said about Deep Rising, the better. That movie was stupid. Anyway, Castle in the Sky, like Spirited Away that came after it, is amazing. It follows your standard boy meets girl plot, but that's where the trite cliches end. The rest of it is a massive battle between the powers of technology and magic, nature and industry, and it all centers around a magic crystal. Sheeta, voiced by Academy Award-winning actress Anna Paquin, is a descendant of a long line of magical beings from a mystical world called Laputa. The military, led by the villainous slime Muska, voiced with equal amounts of slime by the amazing Mark Hamill. Seriously, is there anything this man isn't good at? Want to use Sheeta, not only for their own selfish needs, but to harness the power of the crystal she wears around her neck, which is their only lead to Laputa and the last remnant of its ancient civilization. At the same time, pirates, led by Captain Dola, voiced by Cloris Leachman, also want the crystal, but not to take over the world, but just to get treasure. By the way, one of the pirates is voiced by Mandy Patinkin.
You're the smartest and the dumbest person I've ever known.
I would have said Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride, but that works too. But in all seriousness, Castle in the Sky is a terrific film. I was expecting it to be going into it, and I felt nothing less than blown away by it. It's a great film, but I still have 6 more films that I think are better. Case in point. Royal Space Force, The Wings of Oniamise. This film is one of the only ones on this list that I have little to no history with. It was around late 2013 that I was browsing Amazon, like I always do when I want something, and I found... Amazon has a lot of stuff. Oh, and I also found a little movie on Blu-ray called Royal Space Force. It looked old, but it looked interesting to me, so I asked for it for Christmas that year. Completely on a whim. I didn't know what it was about, I had never heard of it before in my life, but I wanted it anyway. You know how you should never judge a book by its cover? Well, that is just absolutely not the case with me. When it comes to things like anime, video games, heck, with just about everything I consume, I pretty much always decide whether I want it or not, based what's on the cover. Sometimes I think it's really good. Sometimes I don't like it as much. Royal Space Force is one of the really good ones. In an alternate history, Shiro is a soldier in a rather half-hearted space program. After one of his fellow astronauts dies in an accident, he decides to join the space program himself. In the process, he meets and befriends a religious woman who inspires him to become the first man in space. Okay, so this movie is great, but there is one thing about it that might make it a couple of sandwiches short of a picnic. If you have seen this movie, then you will know exactly what I'm talking about. If not, well, too bad. I'm not going to tell you because it makes me too uncomfortable to think about. But apart from that, Royal Space Force is fantastic. Everyone knows what they like, and they usually like to stick to what they know. But every now and again, it's good to take a chance. Who knows? You might run into a new favorite of yours. Take a chance, just as I did with Royal Space Force. Galaxy Express 39. Hoo boy. Now here's a nostalgia trip. The oldest entry on this list, and by far the one that I have the most interesting story behind. When I was a little Jack, back in the good old 1990s, I woke up one fine Saturday morning, and I started flipping through the channels. I was looking for something for me, like Batman, Darkwing Duck, Dexter's Laboratory, or something of that nature. But I found nothing of the sort. What I did find was the Sci-Fi Channel. I didn't watch a lot of the Sci-Fi Channel when I was a kid, but at the very least, I was aware of it. I knew that the channel aired shows like Farscape, Sliders, Lex, and my personal favorite, Mystery Science Theater 3000. But apart from the latter, I never watched any of them. That all changed when I turned on the channel that fateful day and found this. Galaxy Express 39 was the first mature animated film I had ever seen, ever. Of course, I knew about The Simpsons and South Park and how they had cursing and toilet humor and such, but Galaxy Express 39 was completely different. It still had cursing, and that was cool, but it wasn't funny at all. It was dramatic, it was epic, it was beautiful and majestic. Released in 1979, and based on a manga and anime series created by Reiji Matsumoto, Galaxy Express 39 is about Tetsuro Hoshino and his spacefaring quest to avenge the death of his mother at the hands of the evil machine Count Mecha. Guided by the beautiful but mysterious Maytel, Tetsuro travels through the cosmos on a space locomotive, the eponymous Galaxy Express, to murder the Count. And since they're on a space train, and since this was based on a manga and anime series, they made a few stops on different planets, like a western planet, an ice planet, and a few others. This is a bit of a fault the movie has, because, in retrospect, it might have caused the movie to lose a bit of direction. Some of it is interesting, but sometimes you just want to get on with the story. But apart from that, Galaxy Express 39 is a great little retro anime film. After I saw this, I would tune into the Sci-Fi Channel for a few more Saturday mornings and catch Kashan Robot Hunter, Demon City Shinjuku, Iria, Zerum the Animation, and even the sequel to Galaxy Express 39, Adieu Galaxy Express 39. I have both films on VHS. If you are an anime fan and want to experience a classic, I highly recommend Galaxy Express 39.
What are those dark spots?
Souvenirs from my past. Unexploded bullets picked up over the years during raids on various planets.
But aren't you worried that someday they might go off?
If that ever happens, I figure I'll be too busy bleeding to worry.
Ghost in the Shell. Ah, man, Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell right here. It only took me like 10 years to watch it. And wow. Wowzy, wow. It's kind of deep. I have to admit, I rented this movie from Netflix in December of 2015. I was 25 when I saw it, and I liked it alright. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. But I also just didn't get it. It had so many deep philosophical questions, and I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I even had a little bit of trouble following the story. But what I could follow was the bare minimum. The year is 2029, and Major Motoko Kusanagi is a cyborg cop working with Section 9. She and her partner, Bateau, are assigned by the chief to hunt down a mysterious hacker called the Puppet Master. That's honestly all I got. The rest of it to me was just a lot of philosophical discussions about what it means to be human and other such things that just went way over my head. After sending it back, I promptly bought the film, on VHS naturally, and I watched it again. I thought it might be better the second time around. So I watched it again, and 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 again,
And again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again.
What a pumpkin.
No, but seriously, third or fourth time around, I started to get more into the story and the action. Especially the action. This film may be mostly deep philosophy about the nature of humanity and all that, but if you're a first-time viewer, as I once was, don't let that put you off. I didn't see this when I was younger, but even that didn't stop me from enjoying this film. One of the greatest, and one of my favorites. Princess Mononoke. First and foremost, I want to thank my brother for recommending this movie to me when I was a little Jack. Thank you very much, Joel. For the sake of context, when I was a little Jack, I was browsing Blockbuster Video, looking for movies, as one did when browsing Blockbuster. I was looking at the new releases, and my brother pointed out a VHS tape called Princess Mononoke. "I've heard this movie is good," he said with that mischievous little twinkle in his eye he was so famous for. But despite being a little Jack, I was a smart little Jack. I was on to him. So I refused. I didn't care that it was anime. I didn't care that it was PG-13. I didn't care that it was PG-13 and anime. I didn't rent it, and I had no intention of renting it. Then I watched Mission to Mars. So boring. But enough about that. Before the film, I saw some previews, because it was on VHS, and VHS had some extras. One of the previews was for none other than Princess Mononoke, and the condensed version of this very, very long story is that I rented Princess Mononoke from Blockbuster and then promptly bought it from Best Buy. Another Studio Ghibli masterpiece from the amazing Hayao Miyazaki, Princess Mononoke tells the tale of Ashitaka, a warrior prince who is infected by a demon virus that will eventually kill him. Unless he finds the mysterious forest spirit for help, along with an equally mysterious and savage wolf woman named San, all hope is lost for our hero. Along the way, Ashitaka meets the seemingly benevolent ruler of Irontown, Lady Eboshi, and also Jigo, a monk, who also want the forest spirit, but ultimately for their own ulterior motives. Princess Mononoke is, for lack of a better word, amazing. This is one of the last hand-drawn films to be animated completely without the use of digital enhancement. That is, everything was first drawn on paper, then inked onto celluloid, then painted, then scanned onto the camera. All by hand, all traditionally. Additionally, all of the backgrounds were hand-painted too. They all look like they were taken straight out of an episode of The Joy of Painting. Seriously. If Studio Ghibli doesn't command your respect and admiration after watching this movie, then I don't know what will. I have the film on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. I grew up watching the film in English on VHS. The English dub was produced by Miramax and adapted by Neil Gaiman of all people. In retrospect, some of the English voice acting is hit or miss. Some bits are kinda hit.
Even if every one of us dies, it will be a battle the humans will never forget.
Some bits are a little bit miss.
Are you selling soup or donkey piss?
But nonetheless, After purchasing it on Blu-ray and DVD and seeing it in glorious widescreen and super sleek high definition, I noticed so much that I never did before. And with each viewing, I notice even more. Yeah, it's one of those movies. Like Casablanca. But in conclusion, Princess Mononoke is amazing, and if you haven't seen it, you are doing it wrong. See it. You will be more complete for having done so.
Well, I give up. You can't win against fools.
Akira. The movie, even at 124 minutes, has the densely packed sweep and go-for-it pep of a pop epic. Jay Cox, Time Magazine. A lavish animation extravaganza produced at a cost of $8 million, this futuristic exploration is a follow-up by author-director Katsuhiro Otomo to his tremendously popular comic books. Variety Staff, Variety. An impressive achievement, often suggesting a weird expressionist blend of 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Warriors, Blade Runner, and Forbidden Planet. Jeff Andrew, Time Out. A phenomenal work of animation with all the hallmarks of an instant cult classic. Janet Maslin, New York Times. Easily the most breathtaking and kinetic anime film ever made. Michael Atkinson, Village Voice. The most expensive animated feature ever made in Japan, and easily the most impressive as well. Richard Harrington, Washington Post. Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs up. Holds an 87% certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes as of this writing. None of this, and I mean none of this, can describe the sheer majesty and amazing, colossal greatness that is Akira. In 1982, Katsuhiro Otomo created what would eventually become one of the greatest comics ever made, winning the Kodansha Manga Award and the Harvey Award. 6 years later, in 1988, 30 years ago this year, Katsuhiro Otomo directed and co-wrote what would later be known as one of the greatest animated films, as well as one of the greatest science fiction films of all time, Akira. Seriously, what else is there to say about this film that hasn't already been said? It always appears on every top anime film list. People who don't like anime watch this movie and become anime fans overnight. This film, along with others like Fritz the Cat, proved once and for all that animation is a serious storytelling medium and not just one to be enjoyed exclusively by small children or to sell stupid toys. But this being a list of my favorite anime films, I should probably explain why it is my favorite. So here I go. Akira tells the story of Kaneda, the leader of a biker gang who spend most of their time terrorizing innocent bystanders as well as other rival biker gangs. However, one of the gang members, Tetsuo, gets captured by the military after an encounter with an escaped child with telekinetic powers. Scientists conduct all kinds of weird experiments on Tetsuo, which lead to him gaining said telekinetic powers himself. This leads him to look for an entity called Akira, a mysterious government project that destroyed Tokyo. And that is a severely truncated synopsis. I know I've praised this film quite a bit so far, so I'll continue. Akira is an artistic achievement, to say the very least. Similarly to Princess Mononoke, every background in Akira was hand-painted. All of them are absolutely gorgeous. Some of the most gorgeous are blink and you'll miss them. For example, do you remember this image? No? Well, that's because you only see about this much of it once, and only in this scene, for about 6 seconds.
But there's a new seed germinating inside. All we have to do is wait for the wind to blow, and the fruit will fall into our hand.
In addition, many of the colors used in the film were created specifically for the film. Also, the dialogue was recorded before a single frame of animation was created. Usually, in Japanese animation production, the animation is completed and voices are added in post-production. So, if you ever wondered why you've never seen or heard a film like Akira ever again, that's why. Akira is truly a milestone of animation, and you would be hard-pressed to find anything better. However, even after all that gushing about Akira, one of the greatest animated science fiction films of all time, you might be asking yourself, Jack, what anime film could possibly be better than Akira? Metropolis. Oh, come on. You all knew this was coming. It's no secret that I love Metropolis. It's no secret that I love the work of Osamu Tezuka. I have made numerous videos on both subjects. Yes, Metropolis is not flawless. Yes, it may suffer from lack of direction. Yes, it has little to nothing to do with the manga on which it is based. I don't care. It's my favorite anime film ever. Hashtag fight me. Oh well, I should probably explain myself. Even though I have already. At least twice. Metropolis was created by Osamu Tezuka in 1949 after he was inspired by a poster for Fritz Lang's 1927 film of the same name. Of course, every anime fan worth their salt knows that, for a fact. That's no secret. However, the comic follows its own story. The story of Metropolis the comic follows Michi, a robot created by Dr. Charles Lawton, get it, at the request of Duke Red, a terrorist and master of disguise. Meanwhile, Shinsaku Ban, a detective from Japan, comes to Metropolis to arrest Duke Red, but is eventually taken hostage. Elsewhere, Michi, now living as a normal human, gets enrolled in a school where he meets and befriends Kenichi. Having no knowledge of his past or his parents, Michi spends pretty much the entire comic trying to find out who he is, and when he finally does, it's not pretty. Well, in 2001, Rintaro, the director of the aforementioned Galaxy Express 3-9, Katsuhiro Otomo, the director of the aforementioned Akira, and Madhouse, the animation studio that produced such classics as Trigun, Cardcaptor Sakura, and my personal favorite, Yojohan Shinwa Taike, all collectively got a hold of Osamu Tezuka's Metropolis comic, threw almost all of it out the window, and came up with Metropolis the anime film. And it is amazing! Metropolis the movie follows Shinsaku Ban, still a detective, and Kenichi, this time Ban's nephew and assistant, in hot pursuit of Dr. Lawton, still hired by Duke Red, now one of the most powerful men in the city, to create an artificial human, now named Tima, and now a replica of Duke Red's late daughter. This time around, however, there are some major differences. Certain characters who were quite prominent main characters in the comic are now either reduced to bit parts or absent completely. Also, characters who are not in the comic are present in the movie, the most prominent of which is Rock, a ruthless assassin and leader of an anti-robot vigilante group called the Marduk. Also, Rock is Duke Red's adopted son, but Duke Red doesn't like to believe that.
You idiot! I'm not your father, understand?
Anyway, most of what follows is kind of more in line with Fritz Lang's Metropolis than Osamu Tezuka's Metropolis. Themes of class struggle in a totalitarian society and such. But it also contains an analysis of the relationships between humans and robots, which Osamu Tezuka actually did explore more of in greater detail in his Astro Boy comic. Some of the set pieces in Metropolis the anime borrow heavily from Fritz Lang's Metropolis, the most prominent example being the Ziggurat, a military facility where Duke Red plans to rule the world with Tima, which draws obvious influence from the new Tower of Babel in the latter film. Another, albeit less obvious, reference is Stanley Kubrick's 1964 classic Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which ends with a montage of destruction over sweet, soothing music. Metropolis the Anime attempts something similar in its climax, which also ends with a montage of destruction over sweet, soothing music.
I can't stop loving you. I've made up my mind.
Virtual Annihilation has never sounded better. That's another thing about Metropolis the Anime. The soundtrack. Unlike most anime that takes place in the future, Metropolis the Anime goes for a more New Orleans jazz-influenced soundtrack, complete with a rendition of St. James Infirmary Blues.
I went down to Sanchez Infirmary. I saw my baby there.
He still needs a lot of work.
But for all the praise I've showered upon Metropolis the Anime, I hate to say this, but it's not without flaws. I mentioned before that it suffers from lack of direction. Certain seemingly important plot points are mentioned once and then never again. Others are quite prominent, but then dropped for the sake of convenience, I guess. Some of the dialogue and acting is a little awkward too, both in English and Japanese. Particularly some of the exchanges between Kenichi and Tima. But you know what? I don't care. I'm biased. I'm blinded by teenage nostalgia. I saw this movie when I was 16 and I've loved it ever since. I will never stop loving it. I can never stop loving it. The day may come when Metropolis, the anime film, is seen as a milestone of contemporary Japanese animated cinema, but the day will never come when I stop loving it. I can't stop loving you. I've made up my mind to live in memory of the lonesome time. I can't stop wanting you. It's useless to say, so I'll just live my life and dream of yesterday. Those happy hours that we once knew. So long ago, they still make me blue. They say that time heals a broken heart, but time has stood still since we've been apart. What are you still doing here? I'm trying to work.